My name is Sav Jonesa, and this is APTN National News Weekend. Half a century ago, Clarence Woodhouse was sent to prison for a murder he always said he never committed. On Thursday, Manitoba Court of King's Bench Chief Justice Glenn Joyal ruled that Woodhouse is innocent and was wrongfully convicted. Reporter Sierra Beddens has more.
It's a moment Clarence Woodhouse has waited over 50 years for. Today, at the Manitoba Court of King's Bench, the 72-year-old was acquitted and exonerated of a murder he was wrongfully convicted of in 1974. Outside the courthouse, the soft-spoken man from the Penamutang First Nation held up a black T-shirt with the words "innocent" on the front.
What are you looking forward to doing now? Now that this has happened.
Oh, the public just relax. Be with my son now.
Grandchildren?
Yeah, my grandchildren too.
50 years ago, Clarence Woodhouse, along with Alan Woodhouse, Russell Woodhouse, and Brian Anderson, were convicted of killing Winnipeg chef Ting Fong Chan. Though Saulteaux is his first language, his conviction was based on a confession written in English. Woodhouse testified that members of the Winnipeg Police Service coerced him into making a false confession. The trial judge and all-white jury did not believe him at the time. Innocence Canada lawyers representing Woodhouse said it was a clear case of systemic racism.
The Crown, Ms. Jules, and we, and indeed the Chief Justice, all acknowledged that there was racism inherent from the investigative stage, the prosecutorial stage, and the judicial stage.
In July 2023, Alan Woodhouse and Brian Anderson were also acquitted of the same crime and exonerated. 2 months later, Clarence Woodhouse submitted his request to Federal Justice Minister Arif Virani, who ordered a new trial for him in July 2024. And in court today, Chief Justice Glenn Joyal acquitted Woodhouse. "You are innocent," he said. "You should not have been convicted."
What did it mean for you to hear the Chief Justice say you are innocent?
Oh, I was happy. I was all happy when I heard something.
After court, the Woodhouse family was invited to the Manitoba legislature to receive an apology and gift from the Premier.
The gift from the Premier, I just love it.
During a House sitting, Manitoba Attorney General Matt Wiebe acknowledged how the justice system failed Woodhouse.
Well, nothing can be said that will bring back the years lost of freedom or the time away from family and friends. As the Attorney General of Manitoba, I offer my heartfelt apologies to Mr. Woodhouse and his family.
The Innocence Canada lawyers representing Woodhouse are now calling for a federal and provincial task force to approach systemic racism in the justice system. Premier Knus said, while he hasn't discussed that matter, the province has been working to address these issues through the Manitoba Aboriginal Justice Inquiry for decades. Sierra Beddens, APTN National News, Winnipeg.
Indigenous leaders in northern Alberta are raising the alarm about environmental contamination in their communities. They're pointing fingers at the federal government, who they claim did little to inform the Indigenous community of a polluted dock for almost a decade. As Sarah Connors tells us, this isn't the first time they've had to deal with what they say is an environmental cover-up.
And it's sad because the federal government always talks about truth and reconciliation, but yet they cannot be truthful to something that's so important to us, and that's the health of our water.
Indigenous leaders in Fort Chipewyan in northern Alberta are accusing Transport Canada of covering up a contaminated site in the heart of their community. The Transport Canada dock, known locally as the Big Dock, is a popular hunting, trapping, and swimming spot. But according to Indigenous leaders, the federal Crown had deemed the site contaminated as early as 2017, but failed to notify the community. They say they only found out about the alleged cover-up in recent months through a third party.
Since learning of this, we conducted 2 of our own studies that confirmed that the sites are still contaminated with cancer-causing agents.
This isn't the first time the community has grappled with environmental contamination. In August, the Alberta energy regulator fined Imperial Oil $50,000 for a spill that occurred at the company's Curl tar sands facility upstream of the community. Leaders say the company and the regulator covered up the leak.
I guess it is kind of in line with the Imperial incident because, again, information was withheld, but this time it's on a grander scale.
The leaders say they're considering legal action against Transport Canada. They also want to have an in-person meeting with Transport Minister Anita Anand. Sarah Connors, APTN National News.
APTN News reached out to Transport Canada for comment. A spokesperson said the dock poses no risk to human health. And as part of Canada's assimilation policies, many Métis students were sent to federal and church-run day schools. And while students returned home after class, many experienced abuses similar to those who went to residential schools. APTN Sierra Beddens sits down with survivor Andrew Carrier at the former site of a Catholic-run day school. A warning to our viewers, this story mentions physical and sexual abuse.
École Saint-Marie is a Catholic run day school run by the St. Boniface Diocese, and I started here in grade 1 in 1964. And I myself am also a survivor of a day school sexual abuse that occurred here at the age of 7 years old. That was back in 1965.
A modest church and childcare center are tucked away in Winnipeg's Old St. Vital neighborhood. But for Andrew Carrier, it's a haunting reminder of the abuse he endured at the former École Saint-Marie day school.
I had to confess my sins at the age of 7 years old, and the concept of a sin was beyond my knowledge at that time. And during that process where I had to repent and confess my sins, he took me aside and in where the changing room were for the priests in the back of the church, and proceeded to sexually abuse me. That year I failed grade 2 because of lack of being able to concentrate, and also because of the fear that I would be victimized again by the priests.
Carrier is among the estimated thousands of Métis who attended federal and church-run day schools in Canada. Despite being able to go home after school, their experiences often mirror those of residential school survivors. While many Métis attended residential schools, others were sent to day schools or provincial schools. Métis scholar Dr. Tricia Logan said the federal government created a classification system to determine where Métis children should be sent.
If they were living closer to a non-Indigenous community or living like a farming, like scriptland or farming life, then they would less likely be taken according to the written classifications. Or if they were living, quote, the Indian mode of life, they would be more likely to be taken.
As a child, Carrier lived around the corner from the school. He remembers coming home to tell his mother what the priests did.
I distinctly remember my mother reacting very angrily, and I thought she was angry at me. Actually, she hit me because I was distraught, and she slapped me and she said, "Je veux pas entendre parler," which means I don't want you to talk about this.
Today, as the Manitoba Métis Federation's Minister of Residential and Day Schools, sharing his experience and connecting with survivors is his mission. He says day school trauma impacts survivors to this day.
I've heard of attempted suicides or thoughts of suicides. I've heard a lot of depression. The trauma of surviving this type of abuse is with you for the rest of your life.
For survivors and their families, locating records can be exhausting. Logan says school administrators often manipulated records and left Métis off attendance lists, making some ineligible for settlement claims.
When Métis children came, or Métis survivors came to claim compensation, their attendance wasn't recorded, or wasn't recorded consistently, or fairly. So the reflection of how Métis were treated inside the schools then rippled down to the records, the administration, and the legal cases.
In fact, Carrier says the only proof he has of attending École Saint-Marie is his student ID card. That and his memories.
We have to listen to the truth before we can look at the healing process. And the truth is this, is that it happened under the watch of the Catholic Church. It happened under the watch of my parents. It happened under the watch of the community. But more importantly, where were our medical and our legal system protecting the families who did speak out at the time?
6 decades on at the site of École Saint-Marie, Carrier holds a sash created in honor of Métis Residential School, Day School, and 60 Scoop survivors.
A black thread in here to recognize the hard time that we had to survive in order to be here today.
He says it's a reminder that their experiences must never be forgotten. Sierra Bettens, APTN National News, Winnipeg.
The Royal Canadian Legion and a residential school survivors group in Northern Ontario celebrated a 5-year partnership on Monday. The partnership led to a rededication of a survivors memorial in Sault Ste. Marie. This was among several events in the city on the National Day for Truth and Reconciliation. APTN's Mike McDonald reports.
An Every Child Matters flag raising kicked off Truth and Reconciliation Day at the Royal Canadian Legion Branch 25, which sits on the land that once housed the Wawanosh School for Girls. The Legion has just completed the reconstruction of Branch 25, and along with that, the memorial to the former Wawanosh School.
For the last 5 years, we've been working with the children of Shinwak. We participated in ceremonies, and they shared their truths with us from the heart and sincerely. And obviously, any person that has a conscience would understand that there's real hurt there from the residential school program.
This space here is really, really nice. I think it's going to be a very sacred place for people to gather in the future. You know, a place where you can sit down, feel calm, find happiness, and just enjoy the freedom that it offers.
Wawanosh was first opened in 1879. It remains separate until merged with the Shinwak Residential School in 1935. Diamond points out that while the partnership between the children of Shinwak and the Legion is unusual, it makes sense.
I think it was a really, really nice partnership because Legion, it really supported veterans. And a lot of our people went to the different wars. My own uncle was a prisoner of war in World War II, and he managed to get out, and he survived.
Closing out the day was a candlelight vigil in front of what was once the Shinwak Indian Residential School, now Algoma University. Survivors and local dignitaries took time to share their thoughts and their stories.
We are remembering, and the survivors who are here are inspiration to all of us. We're remembering and choosing never to forget and never to let happen again what took place right here, which is supposed to be an institution of learning where families were brought to unlearn their culture, unlearn their language.
I am so grateful to all of you for sharing your wisdom, for sharing your stories.
I was very bad when I was here. No, I wasn't bad. I was normal, but I was a rebel. I got hit all the time. I won't mention any names, but there was a woman here that used to hit me over the head all the time with a stick. One of those sticks, hardwood sticks that's on plungers. So every time she'd leave her room, I'd go and steal it out of her and throw it out the window. There was a big pile of them in the springtime.
You know, we're aging, and we need you. We need your youth, and your smarts, and your willingness to carry this on. I'm tired of doing projects now. It takes a lot of energy and effort, but it's worth it in the end.
Mike McDonald, APTN National News, Sault Ste. Marie.
We need to step aside for a quick moment, but when we return, we'll have more stories on Monday's National Day for Truth and Reconciliation. Welcome back. Monday marked the 4th annual National Day for Truth and Reconciliation in Ottawa. For some, it was a day to sharply criticize the Trudeau government for its lack of progress on reconciliation. For others, it was a time to remember and reflect on the pain of Canada's residential school legacy. And yet others still wanted to point out just how far Canada has gone in achieving reconciliation. APTN's Fraser Needham brings us this.
The weather is perfect for a sea of orange to take over Parliament Hill. Edward Pezin-Dewach is from Kitigan-Zibi First Nation in Quebec. He says the day still brings up painful memories of when he and his siblings were taken away and sent to a residential school thousands of kilometers away in northwestern Ontario.
I know I felt, we felt bad, we're leaving. Imagine my parents, what they felt. The house is empty, there's only 2 of them there, they must have, 6 kids are gone, like that. So they must have felt, but they couldn't do anything. They told them, if you do anything, we're going to send you to jail.
Earlier in the day, the Survivors Secretariat held a press conference. They represent survivors of the Mohawk Institute, a residential school in Brantford, Ontario. Laura Arndt had strong words for Prime Minister Justin Trudeau.
We've had enough. Promises only matter when you keep them, so keep your promise. Do it for the communities, do it for this country, so that they may know what real reconciliation looks like. And most importantly, do it for the survivors who lived through this nightmare and who for 60, 70, and sometimes 80 years have fought for the truth to be told about those who didn't come home.
The Survivors Secretariat has released a new report that calls on the government to immediately restore funding for searches of unmarked graves on the sites of former residential schools. The Secretariat says this year's budget reduced funding from $216.6 million since 2021 to $91 million over the next 2 years.
And so when Canada says, I'm sorry, what I want to know is, what are you sorry for? You tell the rest of Canada why you're sorry, because I don't see where they're sorry at all. Because if you're going to cut funding, we're right back where we were. More lies, more promises that can be broken.
Back at the ceremony, Fred McGregor said that reconciliation will be a long process.
Because it only will be completed when you hear all of the stories, and now you're just hearing, you're just now starting to hear the Inuit stories. You're starting to hear slowly what happened to the Métis children, but also in the United States.
Fraser Needham, APTN National News, Ottawa.
The national holiday for Truth and Reconciliation was honored across the north on Monday. In Whitehorse, people gathered to reflect on the legacy of residential schools. Our reporter Sarah Connors was there.
Hundreds marched in downtown Whitehorse Monday to remember the children who never made it home. The crowd gathered at the Kwanlin Dunn Cultural Center, where a ceremony took place to honor survivors and their families. For many, September 30th is a day to honor truth and build a path forward towards reconciliation.
Can't make it just one day. We'll march and we'll sing and we'll support. It's got to be every day. We have to live intentionally. We have to live so this never ever happens again.
Little Salmon Carmack's First Nation member Joseph O'Brien says the legacy of residential school continues to impact survivors and their families.
We can change things like what happened in the past, but we can't. But we can make a better future. In front of us. That's our future.
He says while the pain of residential school can never be forgotten, there's hope and healing for the next generation. Sarah Connors, APTN National News, Whitehorse.
Thanks for that, Sarah. We'll have more on events surrounding the National Day for Truth and Reconciliation after this short break. Stick with us. According to the Battleford's Industrial Schools Commemorative Association, this school in Saskatchewan was the first federally sponsored facility in Canada aimed at assimilating Indigenous children into white society. It was operated by the Anglican Church between 1883 and 1914. Recently, the city of North Battleford honored a student who never made it home from that school. APTN video journalist Rachel May was at the unveiling of a new bronze art piece honoring the late Annie Pichu.
The elders have often said that language is a spirit. Without language, the spirit of our culture will die. This was the intent of the residential schools. Without our language, we would also lose our songs, our dances, and our ceremonies. The foundation, this is the foundation of our existence.
The city of North Battleford installed a statue of Annie Pichu, a 7-year-old known as industrial school student 0139. Records show Annie died at the school in early October 1911. In 1974, an excavation of the site found 72 graves. The remains found were moved to a cemetery 700 meters away. This is where Annie Pichu is buried. Lionel Pichu from Red Pheasant Cree Nation is one of Annie's relatives. He crafted the sculpture. He says it allows Annie to share a message of hope for all to see.
She is no more confined in that institution on a hill, but she is now doing her part to remind us never to forget. And she will continue to be a voice for those who are lost in these schools.
Saskatchewan's Lieutenant Governor Russ Marasty attended the unveiling. As the first Indigenous person in this role and a second-generation residential school survivor, he stressed the importance of remembering.
Well, I think history will tell us that, we didn't talk about residential schools, right? And it was something that, not that we tried to hide it as Indigenous people, but sometimes we didn't like to talk about it because of the negativity surrounding it. And throughout that history and more recent history, it takes people to come together, individuals who are totally committed to making sure that we don't forget, that we continue to honor the students and the children.
North Battleford's Mayor David Gillen hopes the statue prompts reflection on the tragic realities and intergenerational impact of residential schools.
It really set off a very dark history. So I think there's a particularly special reason that this statue is here too, because the Battleford's region is a very unique area.
The statue is located in Central Park, North Battleford, for all to see. Rachel May, APTN National News, Saskatoon.
Well, that's all the time we have for your APTN National News Weekend this evening. I hope you enjoyed the stories our reporters brought to you today. I'm Sav Jonesa, and from all of us here at APTN, thank you so much for joining us tonight. Take care.